Hey guys, this is a really quick start tutorial in order for you to dive in MoglyphFX as quickly as possible. So first you need to be in a composition and you need to create firstly a cloner. And you have a choice among 5 different initial cloners and a 6th button that is available for 2020 version of After Effects and later, which is the Fibonacci cloner. Anyone else won't see this guy here. So you can select one of these buttons here, and let me, I won't explain what each cloner does right now because it's a quick start tutorial, but you can see what each cloner does on the products page, and if you alt-click on any button of the UI, you have a useful description here, so it will help you dive in more quickly. So the first one is Plain Cloner. It allows you to create some clones along a path. So you need to create a path first, just like that. Okay, pretty cool. You have a linear cloner that creates clones in a straight line, just like that. Okay, so you can play with different transform per step transform options in order for you to affect the clones incrementally, right? This is pretty cool. You have the radial cloner, which is the one that arranges clones in a ring shape, and of course you will find a radius option among other cool options like align or not align, for example. And the two next cloner types are the multi-line text layers in MoglyphFX. So the first one is a regular grid with, of course, some controls to have more or less columns and rows. And you have almost the same thing with the honeycomb cloner. But the difference is that each line is alternated with one even line followed by one odd numbered line, right? So you have this nice alternative pattern, like a brick wall, for example. So you can play with these options here, just like with the grid, the regular grid cloner. And you have some other interesting options, and of course you can change the gap for both axes, right? So you can see that each cloner type, if you want to know more about the Fibonacci cloner, which has been added in the version 3, please refer to the dedicated section of the version 3 tutorial. I have demonstrated its possibilities in depth, so please see the version 3 tutorial for that. But basically it creates a nice sunflower uniform spiral pattern, right? Which is pretty cool. So as you can see, each cloner types is built almost the same way. So you have a layer, which is basically a text layer, and you have two groups here, with the first group called object that contains all the options that are specific to what each cloner type does. So in the radial cloner, I will find, of course, a radius and some angle controls, right? And in other cloner types, like the grid, for example, I will find how many columns and how many rows I have. So it's always in this first object subgroup. And the second group is just a group that is common to all the cloner types, where you'll be able to transform all your clones at the same time with the same value. So if I want to, let's say, not have some squares but some diamonds, I can twirl down this transform here and change the rotation Z not to 0 but 45 degrees, and now I have some diamonds shape, right? So this is how the transform group works. It will again affect all the clones at the same time. And by the way, you can see some of the properties in the transform here are for 3D layers, and by default, the cloners are built as 2D cloner, right? It's faster and it's more useful in general, but you can prefer a 3D setup just by selecting your cloned layer, sorry, and click after a while on this 3D per glyph options here. As you can see, I can now see the gizmo, which tells me that it's now 3D per glyph. And now if I play with the transform option like position Z, it will work. And if I change the rotation Y or the rotation X, it will work as well. So let me undo this, and I will redo it in 2D for the sake of the tutorial. I can change the color of my clones, which is the fill color and the stroke color available here. Okay, so if I select my layer, cloner layer, and change the fill color right there, as you can see, it will change it. And what's cool is that it will work for more than one selected cloner. So if I have a second layer here, I can change both of them by selecting them both and change their color at the same time. So this is pretty nice, and you can do the same for the stroke color, for example. So let me undo this. Okay, right. You have created your first cloner, right? Secondly, you have to populate your cloner with some true shapes, because right now you just end up with a regular square, which is cool, but not always what you want. So, of course, in a lot of situations, you want specific objects to be duplicated. So, in my case, I don't want this square, and this is the second step. So, just select your cloned layer. You can twirl up the Moglyph Cloner because I don't need it anymore. Just rotate them back to 0. Okay, so select your layer, select Moglyph found in this drop-down list here. By default, this is on basic geometry, and it contains some really basic stuff like circle, diamond, triangle, pentagon, square variations, and so on. And you have a lot of different other kind of cool stuff, like for example, one of the latest one I've added, which is called the futuristic HUD, for example. Let's choose this one. And once you have chosen Moglyph font, just leave with the procedural single MJ font, which is the case by default, and click on Add New Glyph. And as you can see, it will open what is called a glyph panel, where you can see exactly 100 different shapes that are embedded in this specific font that I've created and provided in the tool. So be sure to install all the fonts that are provided in the zip file, and you'll find these nice glyphs once you have correctly installed the product. So this is a futuristic HUD, so I can find some really interesting stuff that is dedicated to HUD, for example, like these cool target shapes. But if I have chosen another font, let's say, for example, I have to create an infographic about demography with people, I can choose, for example, Moglyph people. Okay, and now if I click on Add New Glyph, as you can see, the shapes have changed. So let's say I have to create a demography infographic. I have, of course, to have a similar number of men and women. So let's click on this first shape. And as you can see, as soon as I do that, there is a new effect that is arriving here that is called glyph 1. And if I click on this one, but before I will change the color of this one by, let's say, this nice purple. And if I click on this guy here, I have now created a new shape with this woman. And this woman is embedded with this effect called glyph 2, right? I can then close my glyph panel. And as you can see, even if I increase the number of columns and the number of rows, you have this perfect distribution with glyph 1 and glyph 2, glyph 1, glyph 2, because this one is the man and this one is the woman. And you can at any moment change the shape of an existing glyph in this panel here just by playing with the glyph ID here. And just to let you know, if you click on a new glyph again, in this grid of 10 by 10 here glyphs, if you hover with your cursor one specific shape, you will see a glyph number appearing. So in my case, if I prefer not these guys here because the style doesn't fit my needs, I can change for something maybe more geometrical, like this guy here. So if I want to change both the man and the woman, I can, for example, prefer this option here for this man. So if I hover with my cursor, I can see glyph 13 and glyph 14. So let's close this again. And if I change the 1 to 13 and this one to 14, as you can see, the glyph, oh, sorry, I meant 14, not 41. Okay, so now all my glyphs have been updated, right? And this is cool because you have always the control to change the style inside a same font. So this is pretty nice. And let's say I want to have a baby in my setup here. I can just, let's retrieve my 1 and 2 style. I want to reselect my cloner, click on Add New Glyph, and if I change, if I add this one, for example, or this one, glyph 24, I can click on it, and yeah, I have the baby that is arriving there. And you can change the color after a while just by unchecking the colors from cloner in the style options here. And if I uncheck this option, I can colorize each clone shape individually. So if I want my the man shape to be, let's say, this nice greenish color, and let's stay with the same color for other genders. As you can see, the baby is way too big, so I can go to the third glyph here, glyph number 3, and this is the one that contains my baby because I can see it's the same color here, and I can twill down the transform and rescale them, just them, for example, yeah, just by doing so. And yeah, this is perfect. Okay, so now how to deal with different glyph shapes, right? I have in my Moglyph Cloner here, in the object group, an option called clones, and by default it's on iterate. And by the way, what I'm explaining there is the same for all the cloner types here, okay? So in object, you have the clones, which is on iterate by default. And if I want to, I can randomize them because iterate will iterate through this cycle of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the first is a man, the 2 is the woman, and the 3 is a baby. So it will do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, etc. So this is what iterate stands for, but I can randomize them if I prefer. Just in this case, you can play with the seed and it will randomize the distribution. So this is pretty cool. Okay, so you have created the cloner, you have populated it with some shapes. You can add some really cool post effects, like for example, symmetry. But in this case, with the grid, it won't be that interesting. You can create some metable effects. You can create some kaleidoscope. You can create some polar coordinates with just one click. Repeat tile, which is pretty cool too. And yeah, I've covered all these guys here, which are new to version 3, in a dedicated section of the version 3 full video overview. So please watch this video overview if you want to know more about this nice post effects. So the third thing that you will want to do with your cloner is to animate them. And to do that, you just need to apply what is called an effector. So you have generated your glyphs in the Generate tab. So now let's dive in the second tab, which is called Animate. And the most basic way to animate some clones is to apply an effector. So select your cloner layer, and just apply, for the sake of this quick tutorial, the simplest effector available, which is the Plain Effector. So if you understand the power behind the Plain Effector, you will easily understand what's going after that, because these guys here are a bit more advanced, right? So select your cloner layer, click on Plain, and instantly you have pushed all your clones toward the up vector, right? So this isn't yet animated, but if you twill down your effector, which is there, you have three different groups. The first group is where you'll find specific options to the effector you have chosen. So if I have chosen the random effector, you would have found in this effector group here some options to tweak the randomness, right? And in this case, this is just a plain effector. So you just have a strength property from -100 to 100. And if you animate this from 100 to 0, you have a simple animation from one state to the other. But this is pretty boring, right? So I won't do that. So let's leave with the 100%. And the second group is called parameters. This is where you will tweak which property will be affected and with which amount, right? So in this parameter subgroup, you have three different subgroups. The first one is called transform. This is where you'll find the transform properties like anchor point on each axis, position, scale. You have even skew because it's a text layer, rotation on each axis, and visibility, which which stands for the opacity, basically. Okay. And this is why the effector plane pushes my clones toward the top. This is because the position Y is set to -100 by default, but you can zero it out, and as you can see, it will stay in place. Okay, so if I tick on and off this little FX option next to the effector name here, I can deactivate and activate it on the fly, which is pretty nice if I want to experiment it. So yeah, if I want to, I could just scale them up a bit just by doing so, for example. And the color is in the style subgroup, right? So anything that is dedicated to color with the fill and the stroke, and even the stroke thickness here, okay, will be contained in this style subgroup, right? So, okay, I will just leave it as it is. If I check the cloner colors for cloner here, I will have the color that is this color here, right? So I will uncheck this for the sake of this tutorial. And the last subgroup here is the other. And in this subgroup, you will be able to tweak the offset, the spacing of the text glyphs. You will be able to blur your clones on X or on Y, and you can modify the glyph to be all the same glyph if you prefer to. And in this case, 0 means that you won't modify the glyph at all. But if you go back to the Add New Glyph button here, let's say that you want all your clones to become the, let's say, this smiley here. I want all my clones to be the glyph number 97, okay? It appears when I go over with my cursor. So glyph number 97. If I type this exact value here, it will be the smiley. Okay, this is the way to modify all the glyphs at the same time to be the exact same glyph. But if I want to offset them instead, so I just want, for example, my baby shape to become this one, and the guy to become the woman, and the woman to become this guy, I can just offset the glyph from the value I want. So if I type 1, as you can see, I retrieve now the shape of the baby I've shown you before, and you can play with this value to animate all your clones at the same time. And by the way, if you go with a too low value, you will arrive in negative values, and here, before 0, you haven't got any shape, so you will make your clones disappear, right? So 0 means that you don't change the offset of the glyphs. So how to animate this in a way more an interesting way? Well, you can play with what is called the Falloff. The Falloff is a real, truly powerful concept in Cinema 4D, and it differs in MoglyphFX because Cinema 4D will use some real spatial shapes that you will move into space to animate your clones, but here in Moglyph it's not possible because it's a text layer. So it's text layer, and you can play with range selectors. And this is what this Falloff will do. So I can drill down these options here and just play with the completion from and completion to, and play with the completion offset. And just by animating this value, for example, to this maximum value, I have animated my glyph. Okay, so this is a way to animate your glyphs if you want to, let's say, create a nice over effect with a cursor that comes over a menu of items or web design social media icons, for example. You will do so with these options here. So this is one way to do that. And by the way, if you zero this out, the shape of this transition is square by default. And you can see this by drill down the text here, going to Effector, Plain, Falloff. And as you can see in Advanced, you can see the shape which is in square. And if you want to change that, you can do this. You can just select your Effector plane, go to the Animate tab, and change the shape here. So by default, this is a square shape, and you can change this by other things like ramp up, ramp down, triangle, round, smooth. Okay, and just after that, you can still play with this completion offset if you want to. You can even, if you want to randomize, but be careful, if you want to all that to work, you have to select the name of the effector in the effect panel, right? So if I do so, I can now randomize them, and if I play with the completion, I can have a transition that is fully randomized. Okay, so as you can see, this is now randomized. And if I want to have by line, by row, because it is a grid, I can uncheck this and click on linear Falloff. And now, if I play with this value, it will animate from line, meaning from row. Okay, this is called linear Falloff by rows, and it means by lines in my case. In multi-line text layers like multi-line text layers, grid cloners, and honeycomb cloners, it will be really helpful. Okay, so you have the idea with the effector plane. This is really cool. And let me show you how to remove properly an effector. Just select the effector name in the effect panel, and don't delete it directly with the keyboard, because if you do so, all this will be broken with the expressions, so you won't be able to delete it properly. So please just select the effect in the effect control panel, okay, and go to the Helpmate panel, the Helpmate tab, sorry, and click on Remove Effect. And by the way, you have another second button called Remove Glyph that allows you to remove a specific glyph shape. Let's say if you want to remove the baby from your infographic, for example, you can just select the glyph number 3 here, because this is the one that corresponds to my baby shape. So I will select the name of the effect and click on Remove Glyph here. So cool. Let me show you some other effectors. The next effector is called Delay Effector, and it's really, really powerful, right? So select your cloner layer, click on Delay, and as you can see, as soon as you do that, if I press play, I have this animation here. This is pretty cool because each glyph is affected one by one, glyph per glyph, and with a nice offset in time, and with a nice overshoot that kind of creates an elastic motion, an elastic secondary motion. And this is really powerful and really cool to apply on top of your cloner setups. And I won't explain all this right now because it can be rather long to explain, but it's really powerful. And for me, this is the effector that is the most powerful and the most interesting. Please refer to the section of the tutorial for the version 3 of MoglyphFX. You have a section dedicated to the new delay effector, so please watch it if you want to master and to have full control over this nice guy here. You can change this in the effector here. You have the animation order that you can tweak. If you don't want to have a sequential animation, you can change to be reversed, by example. Okay, you can change to be outwards. Okay, let's have a grid made up of only one row. Okay, and let's change the transform position Y to be transform position X, for example. And now I have this option here. Okay, so you can have something outward, you can have something inward. Okay, actually it's not that visible here, so let's position them. This is easily understandable with the position Y. Okay, so inward, outward, reverse, ID order. So yeah, and you can even randomly affect them. So this is pretty nice, and this is new to version 3. So please again watch the dedicated section of the version 3 tutorial. And you can have some really nice, interesting secondary other kind of motion. So basically by default it's elastic, but you can have some bouncing. Okay, you have some smooth effect, you have some flicker effect, which is pretty cool if you change the properties not to be affected on the position Y, for example, but with the visibility. If you change this, you have some nice flickering motion. It's pretty cool if you want to create some nice neon style, some HUD appearing motion. Well, flicker is one of my favorites, right? And you have the quantize option, which is pretty cool too. So if I have something like this, again, as you can see, it creates kind of stop motion animation, which is pretty great. So yeah, effector delay is pretty cool. So let me remove this one with by selecting it, going to Helpmate and remove effect. And again, let's apply another one. Let's, for example, create a random motion. So I've just clicked on random and it applies random animations, and it will loop over the composition time. Since version 3, it's a new animation model that can loop over the comp duration, so it's pretty cool. And you have some different modes. You have random, which creates some kind of stop motion animation, Gaussian. Okay, you have noise, which creates some cycling random motion, and you can play with the animation speed here. You can play with the scale of the noise. Well, you have the idea here. So the color of each clone is affected because the style here has been changed in fill value, okay? But if you don't want to do so, you can just do zero these things out if you want to. Okay, this is the random effector. Let's remove this. You have the Formula Effector. So this one is pretty cool too. Let's actually add some different rows. And let's add the formula. And by the way, by default, the formula will create a nice wavy motion, and it will create a wavy motion based on glyph per glyph animation. But if you prefer to have a row per line animation, you can just select your effector name here and click on this guy here, rows based animation. And by the way, this option is available and tweakable for Formula Effector, for the Delay Effector, the Random Effector, and the Step Effector. So the 4 buttons here, it's written here, can use this option. So if I click on this, as you can see now, it will create a nice wavy animation based on rows and not on glyphs. So this is pretty cool too. Okay, so let me undo this. I will select again my effector to tick this off, and yeah, I have this wavy animation. So in the effector, you can change the speed with this F frequency phase. So if I increase this, it will create a really quick motion. If I if I tweak this N value here, I can have some really bigger wave motion, or I can have some smaller wave motion, right? And I use formula for other kind of stuff here. This is why you have some other options than wave animation scene, okay? You have some other mathematical formulas, like modulo, for example. The modulo and selection allows you to affect each glean over the n number here. So if I have 1 here, it means that it will affect all the available clones. But if I type 2, it will affect only 1 clone over 2. If I type 3, it will affect only 1 clone over 3, which is pretty cool. So you can offset the ID of the affected clones by just playing with the F value, which stands as the phase offset, okay? So this is pretty cool, and if you have the same value in this n here than the number of columns, you can just affect the clones per columns, which is pretty cool too. So just animate the F here, and you will be able to animate the columns. So this is pretty cool. And by the way, the color is due to the variation in the style and the colors from cloners. I don't want that. I can change the fill brightness that has been lowered down to -50. And now I can, let's say, make them red, for example. And yeah, and it has been increased in size thanks to the scale X and scale Y. You can want that, but if you prefer, you can zero these things out, and you just have now colorization of each column if you want to. So this is pretty cool. Last thing that I want to show you is the random direction, and the random direction is pretty cool. It will not be useful for anything that resembles to a uniform shape like a square or a circle, but for anything that is non-uniform and has a top and bottom side, like these silhouettes here, the human silhouettes, it can be really useful. So, by the way, I will demonstrate this with another font, which is directional, and since this is a regular text layer, I can just select the directional Moglyph font, and I can play with I will remove this glyph here and change the shape of this. Yeah, since I have a nice arrow shape, yeah, this one's pretty nice here. So it corresponds, as you can see, to the shape I can find in the add new glyph here. Oh, sorry, you have to select the directional add new glyph here, and I can change. Yeah, I've chosen this 25 version of the glyph here. So I have now some arrows, and I can change the formula to random direction here. And if you want to change the direction, a direction, of course, will have to something to deal with the rotation, right? So I will transform them, drill down the transform in the parameters, and just zero all the parameters out. But in the rotation Z, you have to put exactly one full turn, right? And one full turn will be perfect. But if I want to have something with 90 degrees by 90 degree random turn, because I want my arrow to randomly point toward up, down, left, and right. This is 4 different directions. I can just put 4 here. And now I can point toward the top, the bottom, the right, and the left, right? This is pretty cool. And as soon as I do that, I can just play with the frequency to change the source of the randomness. And this is really, really cool. I can create really nice and interesting stuff with this. And just to let you know, I can use, let's say, let's remove this guy here. So I will remove the glyph again, and I will choose this time a new Fibonacci font, which came with the version 3 font, and add this glyph here, which is the 91 glyph. And as you can see, this is pretty cool because I can do some really cool patterns now. So this is pretty nice. I can increase the number of clones, and I have now a really interesting and cool pattern. Okay, so yeah, this is pretty cool. I can change the color style here, and yeah, this is pretty great. So let me undo this again, and let's stay with this one, and 5 by 5 will be perfect. And yeah, this is it for the Formula Effector. Really, really powerful. Again, let's remove this effector, and you can play with. Actually, let's have only one row, and let's play with the step effector. And actually, it will create a really sequential transformation. So from the first to the last, it will transform them incrementally, and it will scale them up on y-axis by default. But of course, you can do anything you want. You can play with the position y, the rotation. Of course, it's a circle, so you can't do a rotation really. But you can do, yeah, interesting kind of stuff. So actually, let's change again for the basic geometry, add a simple square. Let's make the anchor point to be centered here. And yeah, we can create some interesting kind of graphics just by doing so. And you can, if you type U on your keyboard, you can see 2 keyframes here, okay? And if you make this, if you easy ease this, you can, if you easy ease that, you can select your keyframe, go to the graph editor, and you can tweak the tangents here. And as you can see, the transformation will depend on the graph editor. This is pretty cool and pretty interesting. It opens up a lot of opportunities for you as a graphic designer and animator. So this is pretty cool. So this is what the step effector does. So let's actually remove that again, and let's put a random effector to just finish this demonstration. So the random will randomly transform the color. So I've already demonstrated the random effector. So yeah, to finish this up, I will just demonstrate quickly the time effector. The time effector will just, without any keyframe, make a perpetual motion, and by default it will place with the rotation Z, and this is this value that makes the rotation of the clone possible. So the greater value you put there, the faster the move will be. Okay, and the change in color is due to the style fill hue here. So if I do this value increasing here, I can really change the colors really quickly if I want to. You can of course play with other options like for example position Y, and T means that it will depend of time. Okay, and some values won't be affected by time, like visibility, and this is why you don't see a T here. Okay, so again, let's remove this, and we are almost finished. So if you want to know more about the sound and the group effectors that have been added in version 2, please refer to the dedicated sections of the version 2 tutorials about group and sound effectors. And yeah, this is almost it. I won't talk about the FX parameters right now because it's a bit difficult. It's a quick overview. And the Helpmate panel has all these big guys here. I won't talk about this right now as well because it would be too long. So please refer to the version 2 tutorial as well because I've covered this in depth in this tutorial. And just to finish this up, to let you know, in the Helpmate tab, you can create your own glyph font to use with MoglyphFX that you will be able to retrieve here in the list. And to do so, just use the button called Custom Font. Sorry. And it will open what is called Custom Font Creation Assistant, and it will lead you to step by step to let you create your own custom font in Illustrator. So if you are a designer that uses a lot Illustrator, it shouldn't be a big deal to create this custom font for you. But for anyone else, just contact me with the font request button here. If you open this up, it has been added in version 3. You can find my personal address, and don't hesitate to send me some font requests. I will be more than happy to help you with that. I can send you some propositions and some prices depending of your budget, depending of your requests. So yeah, don't hesitate to do so. And yeah, finally, you can change some basic settings in MoglyphFX thanks to this guy here, which is new to version 3 as well. And you can retrieve your info and licenses here with this last button here. So this is it for this quick tutorial overview. I hope it will allow you guys to quickly understand the basics behind MoglyphFX. And of course, I strongly advise you to, if you want to master and to have the full potential about the product, to watch the full video series. But yeah, you should have enough basics right now with this overview. So I hope you guys will like it, and see you later. Bye.